Oh, not being held captive. I pressed the wrong button. I was trying to get all my settings fixed, and I accidentally pressed go live, and I ended it as fast as I could. Sorry. And then I had to restart my computer. I appreciate the concern of everybody. I hope everybody's having a great weekend. I appreciate you dropping in. Yeah, I'm okay. I was just, like I said, trying to get everything working properly, and instead of record, I hit go live. And, yeah, that was fun. Dennis says, we thought you were kidnapped. I think if I was kidnapped, the first thing they wouldn't want to do is go live. Although that would be an interesting tactic. What's up, Alvin? Appreciate you from Texas, dude.
You got them sugar buns.
Oh, Prelude coming in with some sugar buns. Thanks so much, dude. It says much love, my dude. Glad you made it, dude. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Sorry for the random little scare for some of you, I guess. That was not intended. What's up, Barry? Yeah, I figured, Dennis. I don't think many people would think I was kidnapped and then went live. What's up, Jenny Spy? Good to see you too. Glad you made it. Yeah, so the stream will be pretty chill. We'll go through some stories, kind of like what we did on our last stream. Go through some of my old videos. And have some scary games in the back. I'll chat with everybody and just have a real chill stream for the weekend. Everyone can wind down. Cleo said, just saw your comment on Drill Sergeant's video. Oh yeah, that one where that soldier was sleeping. Yep. Yep. We had that happen plenty of times in basic training. Don't lie about it. Just admit you were sleeping and then get smoked. Red Tetra Gaming said, oh, I thought you were caught by a cult and sent a distress signal. Sacrament. Nice to see. It was a chill cult that let you go. Exactly. Not all cults are bad, I guess, right? Optic, what's going on, dude? Glad you made it. Sanem, I'm doing well. I hope you are as well. Appreciate you dropping into the stream. Alvin said, I'm a new sub, so this was pretty interesting for me. Figured you were having technical difficulties. Yeah. I could not. I had my wife trying to listen because the way I had the monitor set up, well, the way it is set up through the program, it gave that minor delay. So it's that kind of delay where it'll mess up your talking. So I couldn't test anything. So I'm having my wife try to listen to it while I'm doing it, and she's not able to relay the information back to me the way I need to know because I can't hear it. So yeah, I tried to hit the record button and I hit the stream button. So yeah. Typo in your title. Did it keep my old title? It probably did. Appreciate that. It seems like no matter how much I update my title, it'll always revert. Yeah, it added the her. Her again. Alright, hopefully that should save. Alright. I'm gonna close my Discord temporarily. So there's no Random sounds. I appreciate you that are over in our patron Discord for checking on me. Yeah, Discord sound. I closed that temporarily. Prelude. Oh, I was talking to Stacy. Okay. I was like, how do you know my high school location? Ebola. Curious, did you expect to have come this far? Also, what's your favorite food? My favorite food, seafood. I'm a big seafood person. I grew up on the coast of Northern California. So, shrimp, crab. I can eat crab forever. It feels like abalone, fish, like urchins, like whatever. Seafood, I'm down. Did I expect to come this far? When I originally started YouTube, I hoped I would, but I didn't actually expect it. It was more just like I started this literally for like one other friend. That was the whole reason I started my YouTube account, was for one friend, just so I could show them a video of a video game I was playing. And then from there, I went into just doing gaming videos. I did a lot of gaming videos, but I never really had the proper hardware that would get high definition quality, so the video was just horrible. And then from there I went to Wacky Worldwide News, and that was a little series I tried for 3 episodes. And then the research to how much fun I enjoyed it just wasn't there. Like, it was just it felt like too much work. It was too hard to do, because everything searching wise is flooded with a whole bunch of specific shit. So, Lord of Shower, thanks so much, dude. I'm glad you made the stream. I know you were waiting for the next one.
Sugar buns.
It was a sugar bun.
Let me get some num sugar buns.
Nice to see you again, my man, says Lord of Shower. I appreciate that, dude. It's good to see you too. I'm glad you made it. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Yeah, I told you I'd be doing a live stream soon. I was hoping to do one a couple days ago, but things didn't work out. But we got this one going, minus the little false delay. What up, Samuel? I see you. Appreciate you dropping in. Alright, well, let's go ahead. I have a different story. I gotta remember which one I read on my last stream. Okay, that was the one I read on my last stream. So I have another story that I can read live. I haven't read this one. This will be a different one that's gonna be in an upcoming video. And we'll do this for you, Lord of Shower, with that 20 bomb you dropping. I appreciate it. For those of you that were wondering how you get access to the Discord, it's a patron perk. For any tier of patron, you can get Discord server, and for different perks, you get different things. Like some of it's access to unlisted videos. Like some of the videos you'll hear here, it's here. It's from my earlier times back. A lot of videos are unlisted, so it's like 24 hours worth of content, different things. But this next story I'm gonna read live. And we'll do it for Lord of Shower, dropping that support up in here. And this one is on the subreddit Let's Not Meet by My Fair Drama. And it's called My Ex-Coworker. Back when I was 17 through 19, I worked at a small local bakery. There were less than 15 employees spread across the night and day shifts, so we only had a few people working during the day. One of these people was Dave, the delivery driver. Dave immediately gave me an off vibe. He was in his mid-50s and way too friendly to a teenage girl. But the boss told me straight up that yes, he could be annoying, but no one worked harder than he did, so ignore his antics. When I signed the paperwork, they never asked me again to submit to a background check. In hindsight, that should have been a red flag. Should have been red flag number 2. Over the course of a year or so, I worked with Dave. I tried very hard to ignore him. He was rarely outright creepy, but he was always just a bit too friendly. He would stick around late after his shift was over and talk to me about, and the other pastry chef on shift. Pastry chef on shift. That's an interesting one. He always wanted to lick the bowl after I made Rice Krispie treats. He would always stand in front of the racks of equipment or ingredients, just enough sometimes my hand would brush while reaching for something. He always stood just a little too close. He was constantly asking me about my life, what I liked, what I did for fun, if I had a boyfriend, almost daily. He would tell me how a nice girl like me should have a boyfriend, how maybe a boyfriend would be good for me. I let this slide, because sometimes older people can say things that were meant differently in their time. Then it was concert invites. Every week he had tickets to one concert or another. Once he figured out my genre of music, it was almost exclusively tickets to band I desperately wanted to see. But I also knew I should not go anywhere with him. I don't like to associate with my coworkers outside of work anyway, and I had seen way too many red flags about Dave to trust him for a second. My birthday came. He bought me a t-shirt. It was 2 sizes too small. He told me to try it on. I said no. He told me to try it on after work and text him a photo. He gave me his number. And he asked me for mine. I said no. He asked the other pastry chef for my number. She had my back and refused as well. He also bought me 2 tickets to a band I'd been wanting to see. VIP section 21 plus only. He said he could get me in, but I had to go with him and him alone. I refused. He told me he could get me booze. I declined. For months and months this continued. I brought it up to one of my bosses, but they laughed it off as classic Dave. When he wanted a hug on his birthday and hugged me without consent, there's Dave for you. Offering to get me booze or pot? Ah, Dave, you scamp. When he pulled up his shirt and showed me his abdominal scar from a snowboarding accident. Well, that's just Dave. No respect for boundaries, but a good worker. I seriously considered having one of my big, strong male friends come in under the guise of being my friend, just to placate Dave. I was repulsed by him, but he hadn't really done anything to classify himself as a predator. Besides asking for my number, he had never tried to harass me outside of work hours. And besides the odd hug or two, I was too afraid or shy to refuse. He hadn't gotten super physical. Then one day, Dave was gone. His name disappeared from the employee roster. My boss asked to see me in the office. He informed me that Dave was no longer employed at their business. Dave had been fired. Dave was fired because Dave was a convicted sex offender. Davey here had 2 counts of rape and 1 count of kidnapping a minor from the mid-90s. About the time I was born, actually. They had never background checked him, and when they contacted a friend in the police department, they found out that Dave had been lying on a lot of paperwork, hiding the fact that he was a convicted felon and not notifying anyone when he moved. Once they brought his information to the police department's attention, they had a few more charges to add. They found out because apparently he had been stalking and harassing one of the clients he delivered to, showing up at her home when he should not have known where she lived. After his termination, Dave showed up to work one day. he had a weapon, but I never found out what he had. They told him to leave or the police would be called. He ended up leaving in handcuffs. I am so thankful I wasn't there that day. Another little tidbit. The police officers my bosses knew had been in the PD for a while and knew one of the officers who had arrested Dave in the 90s. That abdominal scar was from a run-in with the cops when he got injured trying to climb over a fence. That was years ago, but sometimes I think about how badly things could have gotten had I gone to even one of the concerts with him. Yes, don't trust anyone by the name Dave. I have some good friends named Dave and they're shady people. Not really, but... Darkness, what's going on? I'm not seeing any deleted comments, Darkness. Usually it'll pop up and tell me if a comment's been deleted, but I'm not seeing any, so I'm not sure. America Dutcher, tell us the story of your kidnapping. I wasn't actually kidnapped. It was just a dude trying to kidnap me. Yeah, that was crazy. I think I talked about it a little bit in my last stream, but yeah, that was a crazy thing. Just because of the fact that I knew he was trying to, like, I know 1000% the dude was trying to kidnap me. He could not have been more obvious. It's just, at least I wasn't a stupid kid, because I don't know where I would be right now. Because he wanted me. For God knows what. That was crazy. Sam said, I posted stories of something that happened to me a few years back on Let's Not Meet. Feel free to, if you want to submit it, send me a link via email. I usually have to go through and ask everyone permission, so yeah. What's up, Jessica? Welcome to the stream. Appreciate you dropping in. Stacy says, love your channel, your maker. I appreciate that. So, oh, what's up, Bad Vibes? I see ya. Teddy, I don't know if you're here as well, but I wanted to say hello to you. I know my wife was letting me know, because my wife let me know too, that people were actually in the chat when I accidentally pressed live. She was like, you know you got people in there. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, there's like 35 people in there waiting. I was like, what are you talking about? And yeah, you were in there, Teddy.
Sugar buns. Let me get some numb
Jessica
sugar buns.
Di Cataldo. I probably butchered the hell out of your last name. I'm so sorry for that. Thanks so much for the $5 super chat. I appreciate you. I'm glad you made it. Mika, the game is actually running. It's just in the background. I literally have to press a button and it would show up on your screen. So I'm just chatting with everyone. We just started the stream. I'm saying hello. Read a story. We're about to go through some old videos. Well, old audio, not the actual video. You'll be watching me playing a video game in the background. Trying not to die from Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers or something. But, yeah. Dark says, hi, new subscriber. Enjoy your channel. I appreciate that, dude. Glad you found your way here. Have I ever had stories about people hunting skinwalkers, goatmen, witches, wolfmen, and such? I've had stories submitted, kind of, yeah, but I've never had, like, any to me. Okay, so for those of you that want to know, it's a short story. It's the time I almost got kidnapped, and I know for sure that I almost got kidnapped. Like, if I wouldn't have been scrawny, fast, and on my game, I would have been gone. But, yeah, it was crazy. Excuse me. So pretty much what happened was, our dog, I was at my grandma's, and she lived on a road. Yes, on a road. Not far from a church. And it was kind of secluded. It was like a little suburban-ish area, I guess. I don't know. It was tucked back in a nice, not nice, but a neighborhood type of thing. I wouldn't say nice at all. It ended up, there was a meth lab not too far. So it wasn't like nice. I made that sound bad. But she was in a neighborhood on a street. We'll put it that way. And our dog got out, and it was a blue heeler. And that dog had been around our family forever. So I ran up. It was after dark. I don't know the exact time, but it was after dark. So probably like 7 to 10 p.m., something like that. And so I ran up to the church because we didn't live in that city. We were staying with we'd go up there sometimes on the weekends and stay with my grandma because we lived about an hour away. So we'd get dropped off there and get picked up. And it was one of the times we were getting picked up. And the dog, they brought our dog with them, and the dog ran out and got away. And that dog would run like crazy. So we were trying to find the dog so we could actually go home, so that way we could go to school the next day. So I run up towards the church and, you know, start screaming for the dog. You know, I'm sitting there, I'm like, Sage, get over here. Yeah, Sage was the name of the doggy. And Prelude, thanks so much, says, I just want to point out the fire has a smiling face. Lower right side, does it? I'll have to zone out on that. I haven't noticed that. I appreciate the support, dude. Yeah, that's an actual fire that I recorded at the lake with my wife. Yes.
Yes. You got them sugar buns. Let me get some num sugar buns.
Okay, so yeah, I was screaming for the dog. And then out of one of the houses up by the church, this dude comes out. And straight, I don't even remember for the life of me what he looked like or anything. Like, it was just literally like vibes. Like that shit you hear, like it was vibes. It was the weirdest shit. The way he came out, he was just like, "Who are you looking for?" And I told him, I was like, "We're looking for our dog." He's like, "Oh, I can help you." And it was straight up the most generic creep shit you can think of. Like, that's probably why I picked up on it more, because it was just the most generic shit ever. And like, as he's talking to me, asking me these questions, he's like slowly shuffle, like the weirdest side step, like one at a time kind of step. And as he's doing that, I'm stepping back a little bit because I know something's off about this dude. I'm like, yeah, no, we're just looking for our dog. He ran away. You know, I can help you. And then like he just lunged at me, like straight full on lunged as much as he could. But I was already so on edge, like I took off. And like I was fast. I held a lot of records in school, all that. So I mean, I took off. I was already completely on edge, and he chased me for like a few feet, but then he immediately turned around and ran back in the house. But like the way he lunged was just like so intense. Like even just thinking about it, it was crazy. Like next thing I know, I was already at my grandma's house. Like I was flying down the hill, because it was downhill too, on top of me. Like that was just the craziest shit. I've never had a feeling like that. Just, it was so generic, like the same shit you would hear. And then we went down a few years ago down there to visit, and right around, I don't know for sure if it was that house, so I don't want to say it was that house, but we were visiting my grandma down there. She still lives in the same house. And as we're there, like the police started knocking on all the doors. They were letting everyone know that they found a meth lab down the road, and everyone had to be careful because if it explodes, then all the gas lines, since they're together, everything's gonna explode pretty much in like that whole side of the city. So they were just putting everyone on edge. And like, it looked like it was the same house the dude came out of, but I can't remember because I was so young. But it was right within those 3 houses right there. It was one of those houses that the meth lab was found. And like we were going out of our house after they did that, and like there were straight up police officers with their ARs out there. They were actually geared up, everything with, you know, probably bullets in chamber, everything, having the whole road blocked off because of this meth lab. It's just the craziest thing, especially finding out afterwards that it was like a meth lab kind of area. It was pretty crazy. But yeah, it's just, man, when he lunged at me like that, like it was just, there was no question in your mind, in my mind, I should say. No question in my mind exactly what he was trying to do. That was the fucking scariest, especially as, I don't even remember my age. I was probably like 8, something like that, maybe 9. No, I was probably like 8. But it was just the craziest thing. Yeah, and if he would have got me, I don't know. Because, like, it was probably 10 houses away from my grandma's. Like, it was a ways enough to where they probably, if he would have got me inside, I don't think they would have found me. They wouldn't have known where to go exactly to find me. So it was just something like that crazy. So, yeah. I don't know. Dennis says it's always the churches. Yeah, it was like right across the street from the church. I used to go skateboard at that church a lot too. But yeah, that was just that was my whole little almost kidnapped story. And like that one 100%, like I know for a fact that dude was trying to kidnap me. I don't fucking know for what, but it was just so generic too. Like even like at the time you don't know how generic it was because you just hear those stories and you know to associate those, that's a creeper type of stuff. But like looking back, just what he said was so generic. I don't remember at all what he looked like. I don't remember his hair. I remember nothing about his physical features at all, other than he was a guy, his voice, and exactly what he said and how he was stepping towards me. Like I was just so more in tune with his vibes that I didn't even pay attention to what he looked like. It was so... It's almost like surreal looking back, just a lot of those experiences. It's crazy. Like something like that easily, had I not been on it and taken off running immediately, or had he been faster, you know, who knows what would happen. Crazy. American says, awesome story, your maker. Glad you're not in a milk carton. That probably was around the milk carton times too. I mean, I'm not that old, but around those times where you see me on Unsolved Mysteries and shit like that. But no, if he would, like someone just said, if you're gonna creep, at least do something original. Had he actually played it off more original, he probably would have had me. Like that's the crazy, and I mean, unless you pick up on those weird vibes, but it was just the combination of the vibes, the steps he was taking towards me were just so fucking awkward. Like literally like sidestepping as he's talking, like a tweaker would, not thinking that he's being so obvious type of thing. Like that's why it just felt so, after you find out there was a meth lab right in that area, I was like, that makes so much fucking sense type of thing. So I mean, it was just a combination of all that really actually just like very well could have saved my life, because I don't think a lot of those cases you're not getting away. Lady Pitt, what's up? Appreciate you dropping in. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Alexa says, so we wouldn't have any num num sugar buns by now if he would have caught you. Nope, probably not. Probably not. That was a heavily wooded area too, so it's pretty easy to probably lose someone out there. Actually, that was right on the edge of where it was just miles and miles of woods before you got to another area. Red Tetra is like, tweak? Coffee? Alex says, yo bro, hello from Australia. What's up, Australia? From the desert of Arizona over to probably the desert of I just picture Australia as a giant like desert. I mean, not desert because you don't have a lot of sand, I wouldn't think. I'm sure you probably have some being right on the ocean, but I think of actual foliage. Bush. The bush. Australian bush. Eternal says, just got here, what did I miss? Just a story about me almost getting kidnapped, and a story that I read from Reddit, and saying hello to people. Dissociative disorder stories, please. That's a pretty specific category. I am trying to look for my next video that I'm gonna do, like kind of like the 911 calls, but not 911 calls. The idea I have right now is I'm thinking like 50 strange disappearances or something like that. I'm getting one from every state of the United States. Yeah, I figured that would be an interesting... I want ones that aren't done too much, and it seems like a lot of them are just done so much. So I want something that's gonna have me stand out, but also be entertaining and informative to a lot of people. So I figured like missing persons and whatnot. Plus I have my wife and I, we have our own from Oregon. Actually, if my sister's listening, which she very well could be because she got a notification as well that I was live streaming. So hello sis, much love. Hope you and the baby and the husband are doing well. Miss you all. But Glinda Campbell from Oregon, where we lived. It was one of my sisters and my wife's ex-coworkers. She went missing under like some really mysterious circumstances, and she hasn't been found yet. We were doing some even research, but that's kind of my next idea for the next video. It's gonna be like one person from every state of mysterious disappearance that hasn't been explained or something like that. Yeah, those 911 calls are freaky for sure. Yeah, the one from Oregon is just going to be the personal one that we kind of know about. And the crazy, like I was looking in the Alaska, and man, there's so many disappearances. And I was was like, damn, I could do a whole video on Alaska alone, because there's been like over 16,000 disappearances since like 1992 in what they call like the Alaskan Bermuda Triangle. But then looking, there's already been some videos covering it, so I'm not gonna do that. But I've already known about that. Like that was something I've heard about because it was right around like Nome, Alaska. There's a lot of people that go missing, and there's a lot of people that attribute it to like aliens and whatnot, because there's all kinds of lights in the sky and people just straight up vanish. But then there's a lot of the realists that have it where it's they probably got lost in a glacier or something like that, you know. But then there's the argument, well, some of these actually lived locally, so they weren't stupid. But then there's the argument where like people are stupid, and just because they're around that area doesn't mean they didn't do it. So Alaska's got some crazy disappearances, I'll tell you what though. But if there were aliens and they did want to test on people, Alaska would be probably one of the spots I would go to, because it's so far out of the way that it's not going to draw too much attention, because it's Alaska. So many things are going to happen. There's not a lot of witnesses, plenty of lights. I mean, you got the northern lights up there, so you're always seeing strange shit in the sky. So it's your best chance of staying hidden. So it's aliens. 100% confirmed. Not really, but it's aliens, guys. I do want some good alien stories. I like those kind of stories. Gothic Librarian, what's going on? Glad you dropped in. Haven't seen you in a while. Hope everything's been well. Anani Mouse, what's going on, dude? Lots of places with suspected serial killers that aren't publicized. Have a friend in Georgia near where several bodies have been found over a few years. And that's another thing I'm trying to find too. I'm trying to find like unknown, like a lot of unknown stuff. But the hardest thing about searching that stuff is like Google will flood you out with so many other just different articles that so many people have done, like so oversaturated articles, that it's harder to find those unknowns. So it's just a matter of going through and finding them that I'm trying to do. Alex says, I'll believe it when I see it, the topic of aliens. Well, the way I see it is there's 100% without a doubt aliens somewhere in our universe. And you'd have to be very ignorant to think we're the only ones that have ever had it happen. Now, whether they're anything that would even be close to advanced enough to even do anything is another question. But in some form, whether it's just tiny microbiology, I'm not a scientist, but the tiny little microbes, you know, there's got to be some form of life somewhere else. But as for aliens that have visited us, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. I feel the same way, but it's nice to wonder about those things, you know, because with how little we know about everything, it's very well plausible. That's what's the crazy things. I'm more prone to believe about aliens and all that than a lot of other things, just because not like aliens coming over and manifesting people and anal probing them all the time and shit like that, but I mean, there's some cases like the Battle of LA. I mean, just different ones like that that are just so crazy. Like, I don't believe necessarily the whole Roswell, where Roswell is the crazy alien center. I believe something probably happened there, but like the Battle of LA was a big one for me. And then there was also a different video I watched that was some crazy images, but I never actually researched that, so I never even talk about that one much. But yeah, it's just one of those things you wonder about, you know, for sure. That's the crazy thing about the universe we live in. It's so massive, like we can't even fathom how big it is. I'm not sure, American Dutcher, asking when I asked about the skinwalker, witch, goatman, and such hunting stories. I meant, have you ever read people's stories of people hunting them? No, I haven't actually heard of people hunting them down. And honestly, if someone sent to me a story of someone trying to go out and like hunt Bigfoot or something like that, I'd be less prone to believe it, because those would be the most likely people to fabricate a story, is a Bigfoot hunter or something like that. I'd be more prone to believe someone's story that's like, I don't know what the fuck I just saw, but I really think it was Bigfoot, as opposed to someone like, I was out hunting Bigfoot and I saw him in the bush. Followed him for 5 kilometers and he took a dookie. I got his feces right here. Here's a picture. That's Bigfoot feces right there. You know what I mean? So those stories definitely definitely intrigue, to a certain extent. Some of those stories do intrigue me, because I believe that there are some creatures we don't know exist, whether it be like a Bigfoot or something like that. Bigfoot's really, in my eyes, not too far out of the realm of possibilities, depending on where it's at, because I mean, we already have apes and we have humans, so I mean, like a giant ass ape human thing really isn't that hard to believe. But like in the places where there's a lot of human population, there's not a lot of spots for it to hide. That would be my biggest thing. But like somewhere where it's dense jungle for just like thousands of square miles or hundreds of square miles, I mean, that could make a little more sense to me. But like the snowy areas, I mean, who knows? Abominable snowman, abominable. Have I heard about the whole earth reverberating with a trumpet like a sound? I actually heard on the 1st of January, along with about 8 out of 25 people. I've seen a lot of those videos where people hear that really crazy sound type of thing. I don't know if I'd necessarily honestly go to like alien sound or anything with that. Wasn't saying you were either, but it's definitely something I wanted to hear. I think in some form that's some form of natural phenomenon, whether it be like something we don't understand or just like things going deep within the earth that are just having a sound emit type of thing. But I've definitely seen the videos, and those are 100% real, you know, the sounds that people are hearing all over the world, and that shit would be eerie as hell. Oh my goodness, it really would. But yeah, there's just so many things you wonder about. It's crazy.
Aliens. It's aliens, I'll tell you.
Do I believe in the Loch Ness Monster? No. No. I do not. I believe in some ocean creatures that we don't know about, but I wouldn't know. Loch Ness Monster, nah. Red Tetra said, these stories interest me. What really scares me would be spacecraft and meteors. Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Space is what really has me. Well, and the thing is, not just space, but like really deep ocean. Because we don't know much about our ocean, because just as hard as it is to get into space, we can't go deep in our oceans because of the pressure. It's just so great. And I assume probably once about the time we get like super good at deep space exploration is when we'll probably get able to go deep in our oceans. But as for now, like, you don't know 100% what's in the ocean. Is just so unexplored in comparison for how much it covers the earth. Like, it's so those are the two most intriguing things for me. And I mean, just the science behind it and all that. And like for spirits and all that, the only reason like I buy into a little bit of that and like have it within my realm of possibilities isn't necessarily for like the religion reasons. Because I necessarily don't believe in heaven, hell, God, Satan, all that. And but I see it as in I've explained this, my thoughts, obviously just my thoughts. Everyone lives their own life and thinks different things, and no one really knows the actual answer, so it is what it is. We're all left for our perception. But the way I see it is everything, like in a scientifical term, is just energy. Like, to live, we're having to kill everything. We have, whether you're a vegan or not, you're killing a plant. I mean, it's just how it is. To live, you have to kill something and absorb its energy. So for something to die, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that there's some sort of like electromagnetic field or some shit left over from whatever, whether they didn't get absorbed or not, that's kind of just like lingering. That's kind of what I see as like what would be a spirit in that realm, would be something like that. Not necessarily something in purgatory, but more of something that hasn't been absorbed into something else type of thing. If that even makes sense. Makes sense to me in my head. Yeah. Kind of a deep conversation, but that's just my thoughts. But who really knows? Well, I guess the people that have already died already know. We'll all know someday. We will. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll go ahead and play, listen to some like really old stories. These ones will be like back when I first started old. See if I can. These ones are from like 2016. Actually, almost exactly a year old. February is when these ones will hear. Holy shit, dude! Like, YouTube went through all my videos and just demonetized them. I'm looking at this page, and this entire page is like not suitable for most advertisers. Like, you fucking dicks. You dicks. So, we'll go ahead and listen to these. And for those of you that don't know, I guess that's actually a perfect leeway into that. If you are a patron, there's different tiers. For the $5 tier, you can get access to all of my unlisted videos, which will include what we're about to hear, but also many hours. I think it's well over 24 hours of content that you're not going to find on the channel anymore. It's since been unlisted, and you can only find it on Patreon. But you'll also get a link to our exclusive Discord, all that fun stuff. So if you did want to support the channel, make sure you check out the Patreon link. Make sure you get yourself some nice cool perks out of it. It's probably the best bang for your buck, at least. And let's go ahead and listen to these stories. And the game you're going to see in the background is going to be Dead by Daylight. It's essentially a horror video game where you try not to die. I'm going to be a survivor, so I'm going to have to fix generators, open a gate, and get out before a killer tries to kill us. The killer is just whatever they want to be. It can be sometimes a Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger. They have their own made killers, all kinds of different killers. So yeah, it's all against live people. So the killer's an actual live person. My teammates are going to be live people, and it's you try not to die. That's the object of it. And then I will be back on the mic in a second, I guess. Let's get into the stories. My name is Saoirse, and this happened a few summers ago. And I'm going to just add again, yes, these are very early, so I do talk a lot like slower. I don't know why. I talked extremely slow when I think it was because I talked really, really fast when I narrated, so I wanted to slow it down so people could hear. But instead it makes me sound like I'm in slow motion. So I apologize. But you all will hear the progress that we've made over time. Just figured I'd throw that in there. I was 13 and hanging out with my best friend Kat. Where she lives, there's a lot of forest, so we decided to go exploring. We walked along a very long path leading into the woods before turning off the path through some trees. At this point, there was nothing more than a thin, muddy path surrounded by trees, which we walked along for 10 minutes until we were at the top of the hill leading downwards into the center of the forest. It was about 5 meters wide and 10 down, and rather steep. It had been raining the previous day, so the hill was slippery, but Kate and I climbed down it several times in the past, so this didn't bother us. At the bottom of this hill, there was a small oval-shaped clearing surrounded by thick trees and bushes, and I noticed the soggy remains of a campfire at the base. I was the cautious one, and was only about a meter down or so, while Kat was nearly at the bottom when I noticed them. I heard rustling in the leaves, and since it wasn't at all windy, I scanned the trees. Peering out of the bushes, barely a few meters past the clearing, were 5 hooded figures in masks, not moving, just watching. "Kat," I said, trying to sound brave and tough, but it was more like a shaky cry. "What?" she said, sounding slightly annoyed. Unlike her, I was way more careful and aware of my surroundings. I told her I thought I was having an asthma attack. I have bad asthma, so this alarmed her, so she jumped to the base, walked back a few steps, and ran up the hill. I returned to the top of the hill and took out my inhaler, puffing on it as we walked away from the hill. "Are you okay?" she asked. I pulled out my phone and on the notes section typed out, "Kat, there were people in masks down there." At first she scoffed and called me paranoid, but I was determined to prove to her that I wasn't just being a scaredy cat. We walked back a bit and scanned the bottom. They'd stood up by now, and one of them was spying from behind the first tree at the bottom. Kat has really tan skin, while I'm pale, and for the first time in my life, we were almost the same color. She dragged me back through the trees as we ran off frantically, only stopping once when I actually needed my inhaler. We haven't returned to that area of the woods since, as neither of us want to know what would have happened if I hadn't seen them sitting there. This story was submitted by an anonymous viewer. Here's a story told from a stalker's perspective, if you could even call what I did being a stalker. I've done a lot of things because of my emotions. It's not easy for me to help my anger, and it's driven me to actually stab somebody to the point of them bleeding. Thankfully they were a friend and they never pressed charges. But the worst thing I've done was stalked somebody. It was my ex-boyfriend. As mentioned before, my emotions don't get controlled well, and when my ex-boyfriend broke up with me for somebody else, the heartbreak and anger got to be too much. At first I'd just send him pictures of me self-harming, until I threatened to kill his dog and leave his decapitated head in his room, burn his house down with his family inside, and lots more. But they were just threats, until I got the idea of leaving dead animals and random organs at his house. Being from a family that hunts, it wasn't hard for me to get a goose heart or entrails from any other animal in the area. What I would do is put them in boxes and send them to him. I still loved him, and I wanted to show him what I would do if it was legal. As well as the organs, I'd leave needles sticking up in his yard for him and his sisters to step on when they went outside barefoot. Needless to say, my point got across. This went on for only about a month until legal action was taken. I never went to jail, but they do have a restraining order against me and I have to do community service. I'm now getting better help for my emotions too. This story was submitted by Anthony. This is a Home Alone experience I had not too long ago. A little bit of background. I was 15 at the time and average size. I was about 5'7" and 150 pounds. I also ran track and played baseball, so I was pretty athletic. However, I was also very easy to scare, and my siblings would often play pranks on me, and I'd jump at any noise I would hear when I was alone. I also have an old dog. She's 9 years old, which is old for a boxer, and she barks at nothing. Sometimes it freaks me out, but I've learned to ignore it and pass it off as nothing. Also, I live in a cul-de-sac, and behind my house is miles of woods. We had 2 entries to our house, a sliding glass door from our deck, and an old rickety door on the side of our house. The window on this door was actually broken, and we had to put a piece of wood on there just as a replacement. From the glass door you could see the woods that surrounded our house, and it was very creepy at night and in the morning because of the thick fog. We never locked our doors because our neighborhood was relatively safe and crime-free, despite my uncanny fear of someone coming to rob our house. One night my parents went to pick up my brothers at their football game. I was home alone and it was around 9 p.m., so I decided I'd play some Call of Duty on my PS4 with my friends. I had one of those expensive headsets that I had just gotten for my birthday that blocks out all of the noise, so you can focus completely on the gameplay. I had been playing for about 20 minutes when I hear my dog barking. I paid no attention as she always barked at nothing. However, when I heard the wood on the door being messed with, I thought it was my mom and checked out the window to see if her car was there, but there were no cars in the driveway. My heart began to race and I broke into a cold sweat. I was horrified when I heard the door swing open, and my dog began to viciously snarl and growl at whatever it was. I had never heard her bark like that. Even though every nerve in my body was holding me back, I went to investigate. I slowly made my way outside and turned my phone's flashlight on and searched the driveway. I found nothing there, but decided to check around the house. I found nothing, but that's not surprising as I didn't want to be out there and searched as quickly as possible. I called my mom and asked her if my friend Tom could come over and stay because I was on edge. She agreed, and I told him over our PlayStation party chat to ask his parents, and he arrived shortly after. My mom then called and said she got stuck in traffic and wouldn't be home for another hour or so. Tom and I sat around talking about baseball and the latest gossip at school, when he said, "Dude, what the fuck is your dog barking at?" "Oh, she does that all the time. It's usually nothing, but if you want to check, we can." Lola, my boxer, was sitting right in front of the basement door and was acting the same as she did before when the door was opened. Tom said, "Nuh-uh, dude. Give me a knife or some shit if you want me going down there." "Stop being such a wuss. There's nothing down there except for my dad's weights," I replied. We opened the basement door and hurried down the stairs. I was looking at one end of the basement while Tom was at the other. I heard him say, "Dude, who the fuck is this?" And I quickly turned. To my horror, there was a strange man about 6'3" and overweight, and he looked disgusting with a messy shirt and a stained beard. The man grabbed Tom and started quickly running up the stairs with him, Tom's screams echoing off the walls as he ran. I quickly chased after them, adding to the screaming. When I followed them outside, I saw 3 other men emerge from the bushes. They were all laughing and kept running towards the woods with Tom. I went and got my neighbor quickly, as he was like an uncle to me, and we began to search for Tom. We looked everywhere, and eventually called the police, who said they couldn't find anything and would continue the search throughout the week. Months passed, and I was devastated. I kept thinking it was my fault, and Tom had never shown up. Not a single trace of him was ever found. A few weeks later, my brother and I were walking my dog when we heard bushes rustling from the woods. A few seconds later, we heard someone scream, "Help! Someone please help!" And then some more unexplainable rustling. Till this day, I still believe that the scream was Tom, and I am still shocked that this happened, and I will never feel less guilty. Just want to real quick thank everybody for dropping in. I appreciate you, and I hope everyone's having a wonderful weekend. what we're doing right now is we're listening to some of my older scary stories, some of the very first ones you won't find on the channel. You'll only find them on Patreon as a perk, but these are the very first stories. These are from like 2016. These are the stories that got me into it. I see everyone asking who got you inspired in horror. Lazy and Busta for me personally. Those are the ones that really got me into it. I don't have my sound on right now, so I can't even hear a dang thing on the game. But yeah, that's what we're doing right now. Just chilling, relaxing, chatting in the chat. I'm here with y'all listening as we go. So yeah, feel free to join in the conversation. And once again, hope everyone has a wonderful weekend if you are leaving, and if you're just joining, welcome. Let's get back into the stories. This story was submitted by Skylar. The other day I was walking across the street on my break at work. I was stressed out from a very rude customer who I was serving and needed an energy drink. It was around 4:45 a.m. when I started to cross the street to get the energy drink from a 24-hour convenience store across the street from the restaurant I work at. The area I live in isn't the best, but I have been there, done that, and I felt a good trust in the area, and it was literally right across a major street, though it was empty as it was 4 a.m. I'm a 5'1" tall female with dark hair and a firecracker type attitude. I was taken aback when I was grabbed by the wrist as I started walking across the road. It was the rude, half-drunk asshole I had been dealing with. He said he wanted to apologize, but I wasn't feeling it. I told him to fuck off as I shook his hand from my arm. I could feel him following me from behind, and I held my breath and rolled my eyes as I approached the gas station, the guy following in behind me. Smiling at the usual night shift guy, he gave me a wave as I looked over the shelves. I grabbed my drink and I walked back to the register. "Looks like you got a secret admirer, baby doll," Antoine joked with me. I said back to him, "More like a pain in my ass. He just gave me a hard time at the restaurant, now he's following me. Fucking crazy drunks, man." Antoine looked at me with a concerned look as he wished me a good night. As I walked back, I saw the guy staring at me from across the street, so I gave him the finger and watched him walk away in the other direction. About an hour later, at around 5:45, I was taking out the trash to the dumpster. I could hear a noise from behind the dumpster. Figuring it was just the sound of the door enclosing where the dumpster is, I thought nothing of it, until I felt a hand on my back and heard my name. It was the grill cook who was on at the same time, a 6'4" man. He put my last bag in the trash and urged me in as he put out his cigarette. "Stay in here," he said as he closed the door that locks automatically as it closes. I could hear yelling outside the back door and some running as my grill cook banged on the back door, having me let him back in. He told me he could see a man lurking behind the dumpster. He saw him while he was smoking a cigarette in the back while he was on the phone. He told me he looked like he had something in his hand, but he could be wrong. Either way, there was no way this guy was up to any good. We continued working until we got off work an hour later, and I haven't seen the creep since. This story was submitted by CTV186. I believe I was 15 at the time. I came home from school one day and I saw no cars in the driveway, so I knew my mom wasn't home. For sure I knew my dad wasn't there because my parents divorced when I was 11 and he lives in another city. In his place, my mom's been seeing other men at different periods of time, likely to fill that void my dad left. But in any case, she wasn't home and neither was my brother, so I decided to use this time to play on the desktop computer while no one was there to check on me, since I didn't have a laptop at the time. Sometime later, I hear footsteps upstairs and I freeze. Thinking there was an intruder in the house, and that I was lucky this guy didn't hear me enter the house earlier, I quietly crept over to the kitchen and took out the largest butcher knife I could find, in case I ran into our surprise visitor. I thought about going upstairs to get the drop on the guy since I could hear relatively what room he'd be in, but I thought not to try at the moment, remembering how creaky my stairs were, which would take the element of surprise from me. Instead, I went to a corner in the backyard and called my mom to inform her of who I thought was an intruder in the house. I explained I was armed and ready to maim or kill the guy creeping around upstairs if it came down to it, and asked her whether or not I should call the police. My mom tells me Mr. Smith is staying upstairs that day, and was probably asleep at the time I got home, and he's not an intruder. I relax in relief, hang up, and put the knife back where I got it. Yes, I almost killed my mom's boyfriend at the time. I'm 22 now, and sometimes wonder if I had not checked with my mom, would I have dealt a fatal blow? If it indeed was a home invader in the house, would I be in juvie for first-degree murder? And if I accidentally maimed or killed my mom's boyfriend thinking it was an intruder, how different would our family life be right now? This story was submitted by Ashtit. My brother, sister, and I recently returned from a month-long trip in Mexico. We're all pretty novice when it comes to traveling, but we are smart and have common sense when it comes to personal safety, so we felt okay about backpacking in a reasonably dangerous country. Our first day in Mexico City was a total culture shock. We were surprised at the lack of English being spoken, and found it confronting the amount of people in the streets, all staring at us, pushing pamphlets in our faces, trying to get us to come into their shops, and some even whistling. We soon realized that we definitely stood out as tourists, and felt a little uneasy with all the attention we were getting, so we quickly went back to our hostel in the historic district to regroup. We spoke to our hostel manager about places to see in the city within walking distance, and he pulls out a map and circles a few spots and the directions to get there. He also scribbled in a section in broken English, "Not good to go here," and pointed to that area on the map. He told us it was a very dangerous area, especially at nighttime, and we should avoid it at all costs. Over the next 2 days, we went to a few of the suggested attractions in the city, and started to feel a little more at ease with the way things worked, and how we should dress and act, etc. On our way back to the hostel, we decided that we would go to the Lucha Libre, or Mexican wrestling, that evening, and booked a tour through our hostel. That evening at around 8 p.m. we were picked up by our tour bus. There were a heap of German backpackers, a few other Australians, and some Swedish girls. We all got shots of tequila from our tour guide, and we were all getting charged up. Once we were at the wrestling event, we continued to enjoy the atmosphere, until the event concluded at about 11:30 p.m. Our bus driver made a stop at a hostel where most of the passengers disembarked, but we still had about 3 blocks to go and asked the driver to take us to our place. The driver didn't seem to really understand our request, and he basically ushered us off the bus. And look where we were. We had been dropped off on the street where our hostel manager told us not to visit, especially at night. We started walking quickly back to our hostel when 2 Mexican boys about 18 through 20 years old approached us, holding out something in their hands as if trying to sell us something. We had been copying this since we arrived 3 days prior, and were pretty fluent in the phrase, "no gracias," which means no thank you. Within seconds, it was clear that these guys were not trying to sell anything. They were trying to rob us. One started to grab at my bag, while the other started attacking my sister. My bag is a special travel wallet that tightens the more it gets pulled. The attacker became frustrated with this, and let me go and started helping the other one grab at my sister. It was all happening so fast I wasn't sure what was happening, and the first thing that came into my head was, oh shit, she's gonna get kidnapped. We were warned by so many people about kidnappings and robberies before we left, and thought this was it. My brother was a little way ahead of us on his phone, and he heard us screaming and came running over. At the same time, my sister's handbag strap broke and the 2 attackers ran away. We immediately took off after them as my sister had her passport in the bag. My brother caught up with them, and as he punched one of them in the back of the head, he turned around and pulled a knife to my brother's throat. My brother put his hands up to surrender, and the attackers ran into a little door in the side of the wall. Our hostel was located directly across the street from a police station, so we immediately ran to the station and noticed 2 officers standing in front talking to each other. We told them, in English, what had happened, and quickly realized that they didn't understand a word we were saying.
I tried my hardest to remember the Spanish I had learned before coming over, but I had no luck. By this time it was past midnight, and the officer pointed at his watch and said something along the lines of, "We can't do anything now. It's too late. Come back in the morning." I was horrified, and we abruptly left and went straight back to our hostel, where we reported the incident to the night manager. She helped us out by letting us use the phone and the internet to report a stolen bank card and passport. Over the next few days we had to go to the embassy to get an emergency passport for my sister, which to get, we needed a police report of the robbery. We found the tourist police to lodge a report, and lo and behold, they didn't speak English. We found a girl who worked at a nearby store who spoke English, and we offered her some money to help us translate. When we told the officers where the incident occurred, they both rolled their eyes and had a little giggle to themselves. Stupid foreigners, they probably thought. For the rest of the trip we were inside before 5 p.m. and always stayed away from the non-tourist areas. I wish I had remembered more of my Spanish skills, and to this day I wonder if our tour bus driver was in on the whole thing, dropping us off only 3 blocks away from our hostel and not driving us when we asked. This story was submitted by John G. It was mid-May 1986. I was 22, a strong and fit young man on a 45-day backpacking trip across Europe. It had snowed a little bit in England in mid-April, and the sunny mornings in Germany were still shivering cold a couple of weeks later. Now I was in Spain, hiking southwest down the Costa Brava, along a road that mostly overlooked the beaches, somewhere near Barcelona. It was warming up, and I was definitely feeling the heat. Looking down on a very nice beach that required descending many steps to get to it from the road, I noticed everybody was naked. I instantly knew that I wanted to get down there, set up my bath towel in the sand, and watch people for the rest of the afternoon. I was tired from weeks of strenuous walking every day, and this was a very inviting prospect. I was stoked. After descending the stone and then wooden steps, I stepped out onto the sandy beach area. I immediately felt overdressed and dropped my backpack to remove my shirt. I then hoisted my backpack back on and hunted for a suitable place to plop down. I found a spot, dropped my pack, and shed my shorts and shoes. I was now completely naked, with the other 100 or so people around me. I could hear people around me talking as I lie on my belly to get some sun. German and British English seemed to dominate, with perhaps some French and Spanish here and there. I got to look at a lot of people, and a lot of people got to look at me. As the afternoon wore on, I got the idea to pitch my geodesic dome tent on a nearby dirt pad that was hidden from the road. Getting near sunset, most of the sunbathers had gone, and only a few dressed beachcombers remained, so I set up my tent, cracked a bottle of wine, and finished off some carrots and a pâté de foie gras baguette I had made that morning. Then I crawled into my tent, made a pillow out of my clothes, and fell asleep. I was dreaming. Everything was bright orange and yellow. What was that zipping sound, though? It didn't fit into my dream,
my God.
and it woke me up.
I remember this.
I opened my eyes, but I didn't move a muscle. It was probably about 5:45 a.m., and fear gripped me as I realized that somebody was trying to unzip my tent door. I was terrified. The sun was barely up, and someone was attempting to unzip my tent. I rose my shoulders and propped up on my elbows, just in time to see a shadow swiftly rise and move away from the tent door. I realized they must have heard me when I suddenly moved and aborted their plan. My wallet and my ID were the first things on my mind, and thankfully they were still by my head. I got up and exited the tent as soon as the shadow was away from it. My adrenaline was pumping and I was really scared, but I needed to assess the situation. As I rose and I turned, I saw a big scruffy 6-foot-tall homeless-looking man who was probably in his mid-40s. He was walking away from me on a path that led to the stairs to the road, and he was about 20 yards away from my tent by now. I could tell he was one tough customer, and he was probably looking for money for his next meal, bottle of wine, or worse. He looked like one of the North African economic migrants Spain had reportedly been deluged with at the time. I had learned to recognize them over the past week or so. He walked with this sort of decided wimpy walk, not looking back, as if he were just some harmless guy out for a morning walk. He kept loudly whistling some annoying tune. My fear was gradually displaced by anger, until I turned and saw it. There, by my tent flap, right where they had been trying to unzip, was a solid rounded stone about the size of a cantaloupe. It had not been anywhere near my tent area the previous afternoon. My blood immediately ran cold. I was very careful about where I chose to pitch my tent for the rest of the trip, and opted to check into a few more youth hostels than I normally would have. Most memories of my 1986 hiking trip are getting harder to recall these days, but this one is just as clear as if it were from last week. And finished off some carrots and a pâté de foie gras baguette I had. I'm saying that way too fast. Pâté de foie gras baguette. As I rose and I turned, I saw a big, dirty, unshaven, scruffy, brawny, 6-foot-tall, homeless-looking beachcomber of a man in his mid-40s or so walking away from me on a path that led up the stairs to the road. He was about 20 yards front of my tent now. I need a zipper sound. Oh, that's so funny.
So yeah, that was actually my zipper. That's funny. I remember doing all that and everything. Yeah, that was so funny. I was like, I need a zipper. What am I gonna do? And I was like, oh wait, I got one. Yeah.
This story was submitted by Creep Factor. What is the shortest period of time you've ever held a job? A couple of days? A week? Less? For me, it was 16 days. I was 21 and paying my way through college. The job market was scarce and I had few options, so I took up a job at Sunset House as a security guard. Now understand, I cannot tell you the real name of this establishment due to legal reasons. I will tell you this much, it's a combination rehab facility and mental institution. My shift was from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. It wasn't too bad, at first. I mean, I had to deal with the screaming people going through withdrawals and the occasional person having a fit of insanity, but I had the other security guards to back me up if things got out of hand. All was going peachy, until night 16. Owen, the other security guard, came down with food poisoning, so they called in Gary to be my backup. Gary was under investigation, but was somehow still working. Our boss had noticed medication missing after his shifts were over. Knowing this, I was unhappy. I knew I would have to keep an eye on him as well as the patients. It was about 1:45 in the morning when I noticed one of the patients wandering around the hallways. He was peering into the rooms as if he were looking for something. I tapped Gary on the shoulder and told him to take a look. "Oh, don't worry about him. That's just Mr. Rogers. He's curious, but harmless. He's a burnout. Dropped too much acid in the 70s. It's fried his brain." I asked Gary if I should help him find his way to his room, and Gary smiled from ear to ear. "I have to use the bathroom. After I get back, be my guest." The interaction between us didn't mean much until recently, but plainly, he knew I was in for it and he was a scumbag. 20 minutes passed, and I could see Mr. Rogers steadily walking from room to room, still peering through the open doors. I felt uneasy, despite what Gary had told me. I left the guard station and walked through the corridor where the men's restroom was located. When I looked down, I saw a white oval-shaped pill on the floor. I wasn't sure what it was, so I picked it up and pocketed it. I would look into it later, but first I was going to check up on Gary. I walked into the dimly lit bathroom and called out Gary's name. No response. I began opening the stalls one by one, finally reaching stall 4. There was my backup, passed out on the toilet, fast asleep. Fucking great. I poked him and he let out a snore. Come on, man, wake the hell up. Roger is still wandering the halls and I need you to help me get him back in his room. Gary woke up for a second and looked at me with glassy, bloodshot eyes. He's a fucking beanpole. You don't need my help. I told you he was harmless. Do it yourself. Angrily, I stormed through the door and back to my post. I immediately checked the cameras to see Mr. Rogers sitting by a water fountain rocking back and forth. I picked up my clipboard and scanned the patient log until I found his room number, room 703. It was on the other side of the hospital. I grabbed my pepper spray just in case I needed it, hopefully not, and then I started making my way to his location. It took me a few minutes, but I finally reached him. He was still rocking back and forth, muttering something to himself. I couldn't entirely make it out, but it was eerily familiar. Don't overthink this, just help him back to his room, I kept saying in my head. As I progressed towards him, he looked up at me.
Hey man, have you seen my dog?
He asked. I helped him to his feet and told him calmly and honestly, Sorry man, no dogs allowed in here. He nodded at me and stood up. Come on bud, let's go back to your room. I walked next to him and kept him in my sight. No matter how harmless he was, I knew I had to keep an eye on him. I kept walking with him and began making small talk. So how long have you been here? I asked. He looked at me and said,
What's your name, man?
I smiled at him and calmly said, Freddy. My name is Freddy. He nodded at me again, his voice still shaky.
I don't know, Freddy. Feels like it's been forever. I have some friends, but they never visit anymore.
Hearing this made me feel really bad for him. Why were you looking around if you don't mind me asking? I said.
I was getting hungry. I felt like a bologna sandwich, so I wanted to try to find the kitchen.
This clued me in a bit as to how severe his condition had been. He said he'd been here forever, so he should have known that the kitchen was located downstairs. Sorry about that. The kitchen is closed this late at night, I said to him. He looked forlorn and nodded at me again. Before I knew it, we were back at his room, and I opened the door and asked him to go in. His demeanor changed in an instant. He went from skittish and talkative to scared and hostile.
No way! No way! I am not going back in there!
He yelled as he spun around and grabbed me. Now bear in mind, I'm 6'3" and roughly 270 pounds. This guy was 5'9" and maybe 140, and yet he somehow overpowered me, knocking me to the ground. He sat on my chest and began raining in punches, each one growing in ferocity. I arced my back and rolled sideways, throwing him off balance, but in the process my pepper spray got knocked loose. Mr. Rogers saw it on the floor before I did, and sprayed it directly in my face. I lay there on the ground and struggled to breathe. He got my eyes, nose, and mouth. Though my vision was blurry, I could see him dart off around the corner, throwing the pepper spray behind him. I don't know which was worse, the feeling of my lungs sputtering to get air into my body, or the feeling of what I can only describe of being battery acid in my eyes. I got up to my hands and knees and began to retch. I vomited a bit and began calling out to Gary. After what seemed like an eternity, he came staggering around the corner.
Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!
Was all he could get out as he saw me practically helpless on the floor. Harmless, huh? I angrily shouted at him.
Where is he?
I pointed towards the corner and Gary took off down the hall. A minute or so later, I heard a heavy door slam and get locked shut. Gary came racing around the corner and informed me that the patient was sitting in the quiet room, staring into the corner. He helped me to my feet and guided me to the men's room, where I washed off as much of the spray as I could out of my eyes. Gary begged me not to call Carl, our chief of staff. Fuck that. As soon as I was able to get to the guard booth, I grabbed my cell phone. I texted Carl, code orange, and within 10 minutes he showed up with a scowl on his face. He told Gary to stand outside of the booth, and he took down my statement. Before Carl could call Gary in, I reached into my pocket and handed Carl the pill I'd found earlier. He looked at it and his face went flush with anger.
Xanax. That's a fucking Xanax,
was all he could say. He politely asked me to stand outside of the booth and called Gary in. The door barely closed behind him when Carl began to read him the riot act. I tried my best not to pay attention to the scolding. Key word, tried. The booth was almost soundproof from the outside. It was made that way in case a patient started to freak out during intake. But when Carl yelled out,
"Badge, now,"
I heard that loud and clear. I walked into the men's room corridor to avoid any further conflict. I could hear Gary using language that would make a pimp cry as he stormed towards the elevators. As the door separating us and the exit slammed shut, Carl approached me. He began to calm down a bit. He told me that I had breached protocol by approaching a level 3 patient without backup. "What do you mean level 3? I asked him. "I never saw that on the patient log. Talk about a lack of communication." Carl's response was,
"He's been here since 1986. He attacked a girl in his van after a drug trip gone bad. He's been here in the state's custody ever since."
In short, this patient had a violent history and has been here for 27 years, and it wasn't documented on the patient log. I quit on the spot. Flash forward to present day. I graduated college and began working as a drug counselor at none other than Sunset House. Despite everything that had happened, I was never angry at the patient. After all, he was there for a reason. The rehab facility is located 1 floor below the mental facility, so there's a little less for me to worry about. Carl is still here, and there's no hard feelings between us. Occasionally we get coffee together in the lounge. We talk about our day, and I can honestly say that we're pretty good friends. I reluctantly revisited those events with him last night over a cup of coffee. I told him about the rocking back and forth while muttering, and then I told him I felt like I knew he was saying something, but I wasn't entirely sure. He put his hands on my shoulder and said,
"Well, Freddy, it should be familiar. He's saying, 'Scooby-Doo, where are you?'"
This happened a couple of years ago when I was 11. It was about 8 p.m. and I was eating dinner with my family at a restaurant. The way the restaurant entrance was set up was that there was a tiny room you went through with one of those skill cranes before you actually enter the restaurant, and right in front of that is where you wait to be seated at your table. Our booth sat to the right of this little entrance room. While I was eating, I looked up to the room, which had a window that was facing me, and saw a creepy-looking homeless man. I'll try to describe him the best that I can remember him. He was an Asian man and had a slight mustache. He had dirty and frizzled hair, and he only had one shoe on. He wore a dirty red plaid robe and was holding a pillow and a teddy bear, yes, a teddy bear, in one hand, and a small bucket in the other. As he took a few steps, I noticed that he had a limp. He slowly turned his head to me and stared at me creepily. I was really creeped out, so I switched seats with my dad since I was sitting at the opening of the booth. The man went up to the waiter and asked her for water like this.
"Water."
Weirded out, the waiter went back to the kitchen with his bucket to get him some water. While the waiter was gone, the homeless man slowly limped back to my table. My dad asked him, "What the hell do you want?" The man replied,
"Him,"
pointing at me. I screamed, and he limped out of the restaurant without even getting his water. Then he went to the window and stared coldly at me for about 5 seconds, before limping away. The waiter rushed over immediately, apologizing and offering to change our seats in case he comes back. About 2 or 3 minutes later, he does come back. I see the chef look at him, and the man just runs out with no limp at all. They have one of the biggest waiters they have walk us to our car just in case the man is still there. And I guess they called the cops because I saw several cop cars rush to the restaurant. Unfortunately, it doesn't end there. About an hour after we got back to our house, the doorbell rang. I made my way over to the door wondering why someone would ring the doorbell at 9 at night. When I opened the door, my heart sank. The same homeless man was grinning evilly at me, and I noticed something shiny and sharp in the pocket of his robe. I screamed, and my dad got his baseball bat and chased the man. The cops were called, and they found him running a few streets away. Apparently he had a full list of mental issues, such as schizophrenia and other mental disorders. He was put away in a mental institution and has been there ever since. Sometimes I have nightmares about that man escaping and kidnapping me from my house.
Alright. So those of you that might just be joining what we're doing, we're listening to some of my older stories where I came from back in the day. And I'm playing this video game in the background. This game is Dead by Daylight. It's essentially like a little survival game. You try to not die. Hopefully my team goes to save him. There we go. Yeah, just kind of relaxing, enjoying the stream. For those of you that want to hear these stories plus many more, probably like another 24 hours worth of content, make sure you check out the Patreon link below. There's one of the perks. You can access all of my old unlisted videos, and it greatly helps support the channel. It's much appreciated. And we'll go ahead, and these next stories are actually from the San Francisco Bay, and it looks like some drug deals gone wrong. These ones are also older. I'm interested to hear because these ones are back in the area I'm from. Really old video. My old intro and everything.
This story was submitted by Tim. This happened to me on March 13th of 2013. At the time I was living in San Francisco where I was born and raised. I come from a good family. We were lower middle class, but nonetheless both of my parents were loving and supportive. They both worked full-time, with my dad holding down 2 jobs, leaving me and my older brother largely unsupervised. This led to us hanging out with the wrong crowd, and eventually getting into some illegal activity from a pretty early age. There's a massive subculture in San Francisco for graffiti, and through various affiliations my brother had with some of the more reputable graffiti crews, he got really into graffiti. It was common knowledge that these were fairly dangerous people, so when I started selling drugs, I felt I had somewhat of a security blanket. Messing with me means you're messing with my brother, and by proxy, his people. So between my family ties, and San Francisco being such a small city geographically, I felt pretty secure that I wouldn't be ripped off or robbed, as retaliation seemingly always served as a deterrent. My career began small, until I worked my way up to selling pounds of weed, as well as some pharmaceuticals on the side. Only in bulk, however. I would never just sell a few pills at a time. I had made a lot of connections and had a myriad of clients. Some I knew personally, and some were friends of friends. I had met a girl who had bought off of me a few times over the course of a year or so. I knew she worked at a bank and drove a nice car, so I assumed she had money. After a few months I met her boyfriend, Joey. He seemed like a douche. Harmless, just annoying. He was maybe 5'6", while I'm a fairly built 6'2". After a while he started calling me instead of her, and he began buying larger and larger amounts, a few $1,000s worth at a time, so when he called me on the morning of March 13th and requested a larger amount than normal, I thought nothing of it. I left my house and walked a few blocks to the main street to meet him, as I never met anyone at my house, as I always thought it was best to keep my home's location a secret. The separation of my business and personal life was of importance to me. I always carried a combat knife with me at the very least, and that day was no different. When I met up with Joey, he was with 2 other guys. He wasn't always alone, and whenever I went to re-up, buy my supply, I never went alone for security reasons, so I assumed Joey was doing the same. I got in the back seat of the car, and we drove a few blocks to a side street. Joey was driving. A guy around my size sat to my left, and another guy around Joey's size sat up front. I'll preface this by saying that I know I fucked up. In retrospect, I was being careless and had become overly confident, but at the time I hadn't realized my carelessness. Now that that's been said, as soon as the car stopped, the smaller guy in the front seat got out and walked over to my half-opened window and said the words that started it all, words I will never forget.
"Run your pockets and I won't pepper spray you,"
he demanded, holding a can a few inches from my face and pointing it at my eyes. I looked at Joey, and my eyes said what he already knew. I tried to open the door, only to discover that there was a little more premeditation done on these guys' behalf than I had thought. When I learned the child safety lock on the backseat door was on, I was locked in. I made a sudden move, reaching my arm out the window trying to open my door via the outside handle. I got it open maybe 6 inches, and managed to jam my foot in it so the door couldn't be shut fully. Immediately, he began spraying my face and eyes with the pepper spray, as the guy to my left grabbed me, trying to prevent me from getting out of the car before they could finish robbing me. At this moment, I was in fight mode, as flight mode was not an option. And whilst it may be stupid, I figured if I was going to be robbed, they would at least have to work for it. I'm not an easy victim. I turned to punch the guy sitting next to me in the face, as I figured he was the main threat. To my surprise and delight, the pepper spray did nothing. I could feel the cold of what just felt like water on my face, but I had no problem keeping my eyes open and focusing on the task at hand. I could see in his eyes he was shocked by my not being debilitated by the pepper spray, so when he finally began covering his face to attempt to block my striking it, I moved on to Joey, still sitting in the front seat. Joey I was the most angry at in all of this. I knew him, and he had set me up. As soon as I began swinging at him, the other small guy began punching my back and body from the front seat, and before I knew it, the bigger guy had me in a headlock from behind. All of this happening in a 4-door sedan, mind you. My door was still slightly ajar, as the coward with the pepper spray had jumped into the front seat so he could assist on their assault on me. My instinct was to cover my face, as I had been in fights before and I was now being struck by several people at once. A second later I felt someone reaching for my pant pocket, and I remembered the pills I had, and I knew I would rather protect them than protect my face and body. It was at this moment that I moved my hands that were covering my face to try to protect my jacket pocket in which the product was in. As soon as my hands were no longer covering my face, and I could see again, the first thing that caught my eye was the knife in the smaller guy's hand. My first thought was to draw my own knife to even the playing field, so to speak, but I've always known that when 2 people have pulled a knife, it pretty much forced one of them to use it in fear that if they don't, their opponent's knife will be used on them. For this reason, I did not draw my blade. I remember hearing someone shouting repeatedly to give them my stuff, although in all the commotion I couldn't tell who it was. Trying to save my pills, my body and face were left open, and they began to take full advantage of this. I remember blow after blow to my face and crown, as well as an array of shots to the rest of my body. The entire time I'm clutching my stash with something close to a death grip. So at this point the bigger guy has me in a headlock, and the other 2 are relentlessly trying to beat the will out of me to fight. At some point one of them punched me square on the top of my head, and boy did that punch connect. It genuinely rattled me, but in the moment, I noticed that the force of the punch on my head made the headlocker lose his grip, or at least slip a little. I took full advantage of this and threw my weight to the right side of the car into my door, still just barely ajar. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in the street with one leg semi in the car. I scuttled back and got to my feet before they could pounce on me whilst I was on the ground. I then drew my knife, and the smaller guy who was getting out of the car hopped right back in as Joey put the car in gear. Using my knife's button, I tried to smash the back right window, and then the rear windshield as they tried to speed off. They sideswiped 3 or 4 cars while pulling away, and I just stood there for a moment, processing what the fuck just happened. Reality snapped back in, and I knew I needed to get out of there. At this point, people were coming out of their houses and pointing at me. One woman shouted, "Your friends crashed into my car!" angrily, to which I shrugged and began walking at a brisk pace. When I got maybe 5 houses down, a man standing in his doorway next to a toddler came running up next to me with a concerned expression. "You're bleeding a lot," he said nervously. I had been in fights before, and I know that when you get hit in the face, it generally bleeds a lot, so I wasn't worried, and I told him thanks, but I'm good, essentially. "No, you're really bleeding a lot. Should I call an ambulance?" he asked frantically, the entire time shouting to his toddler to stay in the doorway of the house. The man pointed to my left hip, where I noticed blood seeping through my shirt just above my belt. I lifted my jacket and was alarmed by how blood-soaked my shirt was, and by the fact that the blood was seeping through said shirt. I then lifted my shirt and followed the stream of blood with my fingers until I felt a large puncture wound between my armpit and ribs. Blood was gushing out, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. Motherfucker, I thought to myself. I knew right then I had been stabbed. At the rate the blood was flowing out of me, I realized I would definitely need medical attention, and probably fast. I looked up at the man and asked him if he could go call an ambulance, as I didn't know the name of the street I was on. He had a look of pure horror on his face, just staring at the hole in my side. He quickly went inside and closed the door, shielding his kids from the view of what I now realized he thought would be my death. This part won't come to you as a surprise, but I don't have any formal medical training. Thus far, selling drugs hasn't necessitated as much, but I have seen enough old movies and TV to remember 2 basic rules. 1. Keep pressure on the wound. This one's pretty straightforward. And 2. In dramatic death scenes in movies, whenever a protagonist or their friend is dying, they always exclaim, "Stay with me, don't fall asleep on me," and stuff like that. So I did my best to keep pressure on the wound and stay awake. I remember drifting in and out of consciousness, waking up every few seconds to feel the stream of warm blood passing through my fingers before I would retighten my grip and pressure on the wound, before this process would repeat itself. I recollect feeling cold, laying on the sidewalk looking up at the sky, bleeding out alone. While I was well aware that this was a serious injury, there was never any fear of death. I felt content and fairly at peace, all things considered. A cop showed up first. He tried asking me some basic questions, but as you may have guessed, people in my now previous line of work don't like to talk to cops. I now understand that he was trying to get any information that would help solve my murder, because while I was ignorant of this fact at the time, I had a very slim chance of living. The EMTs showed up next. At this point, my feelings of being at peace and content were replaced by a sudden but very noticeable sensation in and around my eyes: the pepper spray. It was almost unbearable. With all of my adrenaline going, and in the commotion, I didn't feel any pain from it, but now laying on my back, pepper spray pooling around my eyes, it was the only thing I could feel. This was only amplified by the EMTs forcefully lifting open my eyelids to check my pupils, or whatever the reason is, as I desperately wanted to keep them shut due to the aforementioned pepper spray. Once more police showed up, people began coming out of their homes and formed a little crowd around me, watching the EMTs go to work. They cut off all of my clothes, so I was laying there naked in front of a crowd covered in blood. I remember hearing the EMTs saying, "He got hit there, oh, and there," and so on. I knew I had been hit many times and thought nothing of this, until I saw one of them point to my puncture wound and say, "Looks like he got hit in the lung twice." I suddenly connected the dots. When they were saying hit, they were meaning stabbed. I couldn't remember how many times they said I was hit, but it dawned on me that I had been stabbed at least 5 through 10 times. I never freaked out. I just remember kind of thinking, "Aw, man, well, this is pretty not cool." And that's the last thing I remember. A few days later, I woke up in an ICU, my mom and best friend at my side. They went on to tell me that the doctor said that I had a very slim chance of living, and that the police had already been conducting a murder investigation for the last 3 or 4 days. My murder investigation. How's that for a trip? I had tubes and wires all over the place, and without a question, it was the most pain I had ever experienced. So it turns out I wasn't being punched, but stabbed rather. In total, I was stabbed 11 times, with 8 of them going all the way in, a 5 through 6 inch blade by the way, and the other 3 getting caught in muscle or hitting bone before being able to further penetrate. I was stabbed in the left lung twice, ribs, stomach, one just to the right of my abs, on the right side, and my mid and lower back. I only spent 2 weeks in the hospital before they let me go home to recover there for a month or 2. It was really hard to wrap my head around what had happened, and how to deal with it. I know it's childish, and I now have a new way of thinking, but I was absolutely not going to talk to or help the cops with my now attempted murder investigation. Many of my friends and family ties would think very lowly of me, if not stop talking to me altogether, if they knew I was cooperating with police, even as a victim. We always police ourselves. Getting even was just a normal thing. But in the past, getting even meant beating someone up or something along those lines. These people almost killed me. The only way to get even close to even with them would be to stab them, or at least Joey, who I'm sure I could track down. I thought about it, and deep down I knew I had to let this go. I knew killing him wouldn't bring me any joy or closure. It would just ruin my life and his. Being such a small city, I was afraid of running into Joey, not because I was afraid of him, but rather because I would feel the need to retaliate. Since then, I've now calmed down and have a new, more adult perspective on it. Now lastly, just as a somewhat arbitrary detail, the day this happened also happens to be both my mom and my brother's birthday, so I was actually on my way to my mom's house after meeting up with Joey. Or at least that was the plan. One of the most painful parts was having to see the look on my mom's face and the hurt I know she felt. On a brighter note, my best friend took off work and spent every day next to my bed in the hospital, hitting on nurses and keeping me company. I've made some mistakes, but I'm so thankful for the people in my life who care for me. Life is precious, and while I was leading a high-risk lifestyle, anyone can lose their life unexpectedly. So value your time on this earth and tell your loved ones you love them, because you never know when it's someone's time. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check the description for information on how to submit your stories. So I don't think many of you needed it, but if you ever needed motivation to not sell drugs, I think you just found it. Tim. Thankfully you were able to get out of this situation and get yourself out of the business so you can live a little bit longer. It's unfortunate to think that that's a way of life for a lot of people, but it's a brutal reality. People live this life every single day, and they get stabbed every single day, trying to make a living for their families. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that won't make it out of that line of work before it's too late, so thankfully you were one of them. I would like to thank everyone submitting their stories.
Trying to talk to you guys, but at the same time, I'm trying not to die. It's intense. So yeah, that was old school stories. Those were actually from the area I was from too. I can't believe they haven't got a generator. But yeah, those stories always intrigue me. I'm dead. Yeah, I kind of figured. I got screwed when I was trying to switch over my microphone. Yeah, he's just gonna slug me and go look for the other dude. Damn, I would have had that too. I don't know what that dude was doing. He's probably just looking for the hatch and not doing a gen. That's what I'm assuming. But yeah, so that was that video. Let me try to find another one now. Horrible timing for the ending of that, I'll tell you what. Let me mute this damn sound. Kind of wish they had a bleed out timer. I'd just let myself bleed out. I have time to just back out. I don't want to lose all my points I had. So this one is from 2015. So it's even older. Holy moly. I saw you in here, Teddy. I hope those reports are going well, dude. Oh, and how those people survived that hippo attack was just by luck. Like the hippo just let him go. He kept biting on him and punctured him a whole bunch. But yeah. Pretty crazy.
Play football. My granddad's place in
I was trying to skip the intro sound.
This story was submitted by Sam. As a child, I always used to love going to my granddad's place in La Crosse, Surrey. I loved it there because he was fairly wealthy and had a large house and garden. When we were there, we would do things such as help him with gardening or play football. However, I was happiest when we could go explore the forest together. Although he didn't own the forest, he had a gate leading to it from his driveway, so it was easily accessible for my cousins and me. We would pretend to be just like adventurers looking for treasure in this huge area. We were trusted to go alone, as long as we didn't go too far out. One day we went into the forest like normal, hoping to find gold. My grandfather had just gotten me a metal detector to help me find something, and this was the first time I was actually going to be using it. My cousins and I made our way out, and this time we actually found something. We found a shoe. We wouldn't have thought much of it if it was old, but it looked like it was worn recently, which got us thinking that maybe we weren't alone in the forest. Now, this may not seem like much, just finding a shoe in a forest. However, our childish imaginations ran wild. We ran back to the house and showed the shoe to our family. They brushed it off as nothing, and my granddad even made a joke, saying that what we found isn't exactly treasure. The next time we were over there, which was probably about a fortnight later, unsurprisingly, we went back into the woods. I was starting to get a bit more mature, and I was the only boy out there out of the three of us, and I thought I was showing how brave I was by saying that I would lead the way. Trying to prove myself led me so far ahead that I could no longer see them. I was young, and I realized I had made a mistake. Feeling slightly panicked, I called out to them, but I got no reply. I began to run back the way I came, when suddenly I heard my younger cousin scream. At this point, I was almost certain they were trying to wind me up and scare me. I yelled back to him that it's not funny, and ran to where the scream came from. When I got to them, however, I realized that this wasn't a joke. Both of them stood wide-eyed and still as statues. They were looking at a dead deer. I'm not the type to easily be grossed out, but the thing was covered in blood and was disgusting. I remember being filled with adrenaline, and I said we should tell our parents and my granddad. We then all sprinted back to the house. I remember all three of us running down my granddad's driveway screaming "deer" over and over. Once we got to them and explained what happened, my granddad and uncle went to investigate. When they came back, they told us, unconvincingly, that the deer died from running into some thorn forest. A couple of months later, I was back at my granddad's house, alone this time. My cousins were on holiday or something like that. I was just playing about in the backyard with a ball when I thought about the forest. I knew I wasn't allowed in there. However, my uncle and granddad were in the house working. I was never the type of kid to obey rules, which is why I snuck off into the forest. I remember as soon as I opened the gate, I was drawing in adrenaline. The fact that I wasn't allowed there made it even better. I ran to the biggest stick I could find and picked it up. I knew I would be safe if I had a weapon like this on me. I was there for about 10 minutes exploring when I saw an old penny. I picked it up and genuinely believed that I had actually found something. I was so happy, even though I knew I had to keep it to myself because my family couldn't find out I was in the forest. I was about to run back when I saw another one. I couldn't believe it. Then I found another one, and another. I was so happy at the time that I didn't notice the pennies were leading me deeper into the forest. Blindly I went on, picking them up, getting deeper and deeper, when I suddenly heard my uncle shouting my name. I jumped out of my skin with fear. I turned around and he was running at me. I had been caught, and I was going to get in so much trouble, I remember thinking. My uncle asked me what was in my hand, and I showed him the coins. He then saw the trail that was leading me on. He told me to turn back to the house and go and get my granddad. What they found in the forest is unnerving. The coins led to a little den where someone had been staying, but there was no sign of them though. Just old clothes and a bottle of alcohol. Immediately after finding this, they called the police. They concluded that a man had been living there for a while and had only recently left, probably when my uncle called my name. What gets me though, is the fact that when my cousins and I were playing in the forest, he was living there the whole time, and probably watching us. Nothing like this has ever happened again. And I now have a 4-year-old sister, and she often asks me to take her into the forest. You can probably guess my answer. This story was submitted by an anonymous viewer. I'm an 18-year-old girl about to start college here in California, and this is also where I live. I've been going to the beach ever since I can remember to surf, hang out with friends, and have the occasional bonfire. This day a couple of friends and I decided to surf in the evening when the swell would be bigger. This was also during winter because the beach didn't allow surfing during the summer due to accidents with swimmers. I drove up the beach with a friend in my car, and my 2 other friends drove in another car. We're all female. We arrived at about 6:30, just watching the sunset. We got in the water for a couple of hours, and before we knew it, it was dark, around 9 p.m. It's hard to keep track of time in the water. We all assumed it was earlier. 2 of my friends had to leave, so we all got back to the sand and said our goodbyes. Now it was just my friend and me. When we got to our backpacks, where we kept our phones, a snack, some water, and a towel, we noticed that all of our stuff was scattered. Also, it looked as if my backpack was slashed in the front. The snacks were open and dumped on the sand, water was open and halfway empty, and my towel was missing. We just dismissed it as maybe our friends being weird or mean, or maybe an animal did it. We decided to just sit in the sand and talk for a little before the beach closed at 10:30. We were the only ones there. As we were talking, we heard whistling. At first we thought it was the wind, but then we realized that the wind doesn't make tunes as the whistler was doing. So we decided to pack up and make our way up to my car. This beach has a staircase up, which is extremely steep, and consists of about 300 steps. It is very tiring getting up, needing the occasional break, and especially hard getting up with a surfboard. We took our time on the way up to make sure that we wouldn't fall back. As we were about a quarter of the way up the stairs, we heard the whistling down below us, but close. We picked up our pace up the stairs, which was very tiring. My friend stopped, looked back, and called up, "Alicia, who's that?" "Whoa, dude, go! Get up those stairs now!" She sounded panicked, so I immediately looked back at her, and her face lost all color. She started hauling ass up the stairs, but I couldn't see what she saw. She just kept yelling to get up and go, so I did. We made it up, very exhausted. We stopped at the top because it was the Pacific Coast Highway, and we knew people would be around and cars would be passing, so we would be okay. We waited about 5 minutes, just watching the stairs to see who would come up. No one did. I asked my friend what she saw, and what she said scared the shit out of me. She said that at first she saw the outline of a guy, but as soon as he stepped into the moonlight, she said that he had a huge grin on his face. When she looked at his hand, she noticed a machete.
Hey, Queenie.
Not a pocket knife or a kitchen knife, but distinctly a machete. Her voice was shaking when she said this, so I said that we should go back to my car. We had to cross the street to get across the highway, and then up a desolate hill to get where we parked. On the way up the hill, we heard metal dragging across the ground. We stopped a few times to look around, but every time we did, the noise would pause. As soon as the car was in sight, the noise stopped entirely. We strapped our surfboards to the top of the car and started making sure that they were secured, when a fucking hand grabs my foot. I immediately kick it off, and as I'm screaming, my friend comes to the side of the car and sees what's going on. When the hand let go, we ran down the hill and my friend called the cops. They got there around 10 minutes later, and we explained what we saw down on the beach and what happened in my car. They looked under my car, finding only a machete. Patrol cars were going around the hill and road searching for the man she saw. She described him as being old, very old, with gray hair to about his shoulders, wearing baggy clothes, and having a creepy, scarred face that absolutely scared the shit out of her. After the way she explained the man, I'm glad I didn't have to see his face. After about 20 minutes, the police told us to get back in the car and head home, telling us that they would inform us if they found the guy. They collected the machete to see if they could get any fingerprints off it. We headed home and just talked about how the old guy got up the stairs so fast without us seeing him, and how he got to my car without us seeing him, and wondered how did he know it was my car, and why he had a machete. The police still haven't called us about anything. It's been 7 months since this happened. This story was submitted by Amy. This took place about 2 years ago, around June or July. I was 15 years old at the time, and my friend was just about to finish her first year at secondary school. It was either Tuesday or a Wednesday, and we had just finished school for the day. My nan had just died a few months before this, so it wasn't unusual for me to get off the bus at the stop before mine, as that's where my granddad lives, and the churchyard nearby is where she is buried. Before long, the bus came to a stop and we descended down the steps. There were at least 30 kids who normally got off at this point, as not many kids live in the other villages that the bus goes through on its route. But on this day, there weren't as many. For some reason on this day, the bus came to a stop at least a few minutes away from its normal place, probably due to the fact that we had a different driver than usual. I planned on getting off at this stop before going to the village shop and then heading down to the alleyway leading to the church. My friend, being 11 at the time, always came with me, particularly because she had known my nan quite well these past few years. As I stepped off the bus, I noticed that something wasn't quite right. Normally around this time of day, the roads are quite busy, due to the fact that the village school tends to have netball sessions on these days. The shop was on the other side of the road, so both my friend and I stood by and let the rest of the kids go past. We waited for the bus to move out of the way before crossing. However, as the bus moved, I noticed a large white van parked in a nearby lay-by. This village is quite segregated from town, particularly because not many people go by this way, so it was unusual for any form of heavy goods vehicle or delivery vehicles to come by this way. As we were waiting for a few cars to drive past us, I noticed that there were 2 men in the van, just sitting there. The engine was off, and they just sat there, staring at the kids that walked past their vehicle. I continued watching, missing the fact that the road was now clear for us to cross. As I'm a lot older than most of these kids, the fact that they were eagerly glaring at the children in sort of a devilish way made me sick, like sick to my stomach, and it got worse as we crossed the road. A few minutes later, we emerged from a shop, and I was putting my drink in my bag. Out of curiosity, I decided to look up, hoping that the van had vanished, but it was still there. To some extent, I was relieved, for they hadn't moved towards any of the children, but something was still off. I looked towards the window, and the men were staring at me and my friend, somewhat cracking malevolent smiles at us as they started their van. For anyone who has a younger sister or brother, or even a friend, this immediately was a red flag. I wasn't able to think clearly, for I didn't have a clue as regards to what was going on, but I didn't think twice before crossing the road, my friend in tow. When we had crossed, the van had stopped moving. It had stopped just outside of the shop. My friend realized we were going the wrong way, for we weren't walking anywhere near the churchyard, and she started querying my actions. "Why aren't we going to the church?" she asked wearily. "Have you changed your mind? Are we going tomorrow?" At this point, I looked around to see that the van had turned around in the grove next to the shop. I immediately knew that this wasn't right. Without thinking, I tried to whisper to my friend, who was now quite startled. I had sped up a few paces, and I was now behaving frantically. "Walk a bit faster," I replied to her. "Don't stop. Just keep pace with me, okay?" She didn't understand, but she went along with it. The van was following us down the road, slowly inching closer to us. It stayed at least 15 meters away from us, as if not to draw suspicion, yet it was pretty clear that the driver was after us. I didn't tell her what was on my mind, because I didn't want to scare her, but I think she saw it in my eyes. I kept on looking back at the van, which by this point was drawing even closer. She turned around without hesitation and fixated her eyes on the driver. Her face turned pale as she looked back at me, and I can distinctly remember her raspy little voice as she asked me, "Are we gonna die?" No one was around to hear her crying, and I couldn't make her stop. I had thought of splitting up, one of us going straight home whilst the other knocked on a nearby door. But then I realized something. I had no clue as to who they were after, or what they were after. If I had left her on her own down the street, what's to say that they would not have followed her instead? At this point, the van sped up, and it appeared to be over. She cried a sigh of relief as I told her, "We're safe now." But it wasn't over. The van had stopped at the end of the road and had parked on the pavement. The whole vehicle was covering the sidewalk. We were blocked off. I thought to myself that the best thing to do would be to go back, but I just froze. I stared at them as they got out of their van and started walking towards us. My friend kept insisting that I knew what to do and I could make them go away, but I was just as frightened as she was. Stuff like this only seems to happen in the movies, but this wasn't a film. This was real life. The two men, one in his mid-30s and the other a bit younger age, started to approach us. Not a word was spoken, but as they got closer and closer, their facial expressions changed to something sinister. The first guy, who was tall and bald, gestured towards the van to his friend as they kept eye contact with us, and the younger one looked down at my friend. By now, I had that inkling to push her slightly backwards behind me, so in the chance that they grabbed me, she could get away. But the second man, who had bright ginger hair and a beard, turned slightly to the right of us, going towards my little friend. Before I could even think, I shouted, "No!" just before the bald guy thrust out his hand to grab my arm, but he didn't even manage to touch me. Before they had a chance to even lay a finger on us, a friendly face approached from around the corner. My friend's neighbor, a little old lady. Her little Jack Russell started to bark at the men, making them aware of her presence. Before long, the two men bundled back into their van without a word, driving away up a hill at the end of the street. I now have a fear of vans. When we both returned home, we told our parents. My parents, who have never experienced anything like this, found it hard to understand. But my friend's parents, however, just thanked the stars that their neighbor had come around the corner at that moment. In all honesty, I wanted to hug that lady so much, but I couldn't. And we didn't even tell her why we were so thankful. But it really got me thinking. If she hadn't come around the corner at just that moment, I don't think we would be alive to tell this story.
And there's that story. There's some nice oldies but goodies. A hippo versus a rhino. That would be a good one. I don't know. I think the rhinos would still find a way to win. Lionheart, I appreciate the kind words. Thanks so much. Well, everybody, I think we're going to go ahead and we will wind down the stream right now. Go ahead and end it. It's been just over 2 hours. But I plan on doing a longer one tomorrow. So if you don't have notifications on and you want to catch the one tomorrow, make sure you turn your notifications on, all that good stuff. But try to do it during a more daytime hour tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. But I appreciate everyone dropping in. We're gonna go ahead and wind it down, head on out. It's 8:30, yeah, about dinner time, something like that. Jenny, good luck on your interview Tuesday. I hope all goes well. You'll have to keep us updated on what's going on. I will catch you all tomorrow if you catch the live stream tomorrow. And if you guys want to continue to hear these older stories that are all unlisted, make sure you go check out Patreon. And it's the $5 tier and above. You'll get a post that has a link to over 24 hours of content you're not going to find on the channel. Like a lot. Start back from my very first video. My very first scary video, all that stuff. So, I appreciate y'all, And thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I hope everyone has a wonderful night or day, whatever time it is, wherever you're at. And I will catch you tomorrow. I am from Arizona. Yes, there you go, Lionheart. I'll try not to get kidnapped, America. Catch y'all later. Good night. Bye-bye.